Start of our hurricane edition Geo Brown Bag. Thank you all for coming, braving the torrential rains and I'm happy to introduce Heather Christensen, who everyone knows. Heather is a geology major and a classical studies minor.
Yeah.
Yep. And she is also the president of the chamber choir.
Barksdale Treble Chorus.
That she's the president of one of the courses here. And she's also doing research with me on radon for her senior thesis. So she's very busy. But today she's going to talk about this really cool class that she took over in Rome and Pompeii. And without further ado, everyone welcome, give a warm welcome to Heather.
Thanks, Jim. That was very nice. So yeah, I'm also a classical studies minor. I know most of the people in this building know me as a geology major. And I had the absolute honor of going on a trip to Rome this summer and getting to see the culmination of everything I've been studying since middle school, basically. And there was a huge intersection between geology and classical studies on this trip, or at least I forced there to be one, so I could do both and justify my minor to everyone. So here we go. So, I mean, it's a presentation on geology. So here's a geologic map of ancient Rome. A couple things to point out. So a major volcanic area. We have a lot of volcanic rocks. We have pyroclastic fall deposits, calderas, or those magma chambers underneath the surface. And then a big thing to point out here also is the hydrothermal activity that we'll see in this area that fuels a lot of the culture of ancient Roman life. But first we started in the Bay of Naples. So this is the Hotel of the Villa of Mysteries, which we got to stay at when we were in Naples. For 5 minutes from the entrance to the Pompeii archaeological site. So it was incredible and it was beautiful. And there was a pool, which we used pretty much every day. And you can see on the map, we're here a little further down. The geology is pretty much the same. We see a little bit more of the alluvium and stuff like that we see in the coastal plain. But it's still pretty similar, a lot of volcanic activity, some faulting and stuff. So a few places that we hit, we went to Bayani, which is a kind of resort area for the Romans. It was a lot of baths, which is a huge part of the culture. Again, the hydrothermal activity, we were able to have hot water in these baths, although they did do some extra heating. Some people thought that Bayani was amazing and healing, and the mineral water had amazing properties, and some people thought it was sin, debauchery, terrible place to go, and any famous person who went there was just a heathen. So there was that fun little dynamic there. Another place we went to was Sperlonga. You can see down here in the corner. So that is actually, those are people to scale. It is a massive cave. And inside of it was Tiberius's grotto. So Emperor Tiberius decided that his dining room would be a cave, a massive cave. And so all of this open area here had a larger than life statue. And there's a bunch of smaller ones in the offshoot rooms here as well. So those are now in a museum that's right next to this cave, but going down into it, it was phenomenal and absolutely crazy that he did that, but the emperors did what they wanted, and I kind of like that. And then here we went to Paestum, which is a Greek settlement, and this right here is a massive temple to Hera in the background. And then Pozzuoli, which I'm going to go into a little bit more on the next slide, but this is actually the underside of an amphitheater in Pozzuoli, and it was stunning. It was so cool. So the first thing I want to talk about in Pozzuoli is this, the Macellum. So what you see here is the modern day land surface versus down here, it's a lot lower from back in Pozzuoli, and this is a Macalamura Marketplace. And so a lot of the Bay of Naples is on top of the Campi Flegrei, which is a caldera that it'll fill and rise the surface of the earth, and then it'll empty and lower again, which is bradyseism. So that just is changing the surface level. Multiple meters, in fact, as you can see on these columns, this is so cool. About 7 meters up, you can see boreholes from mollusks. So you know that at some point, at least 7 meters up, this whole thing was underground because of this bradyseism. And we're seeing that rise and fall from the caldera up until the most recent one, I think, was in the 1980s, where the surface level changed a few meters still. So this is still happening, and it's kind of drastic changes, which is really cool getting to see that in our own lifetime. So in Pompeii and Herculaneum, which were the main things we did in the Bay of Naples, these are just some cool pictures first before I get into the geology. This was a little gladiator duel in the amphitheater there at Pompeii. I was getting absolutely beat up This is one of our site reports. That was a big part of our grade, was doing presentations on different sites. And this is my friend Gabby doing a presentation on the Temple of Isis in Pompeii. And these are both pictures of Herculaneum. Again, you can see this is Vesuvius in the background. You can see the modern surface level and then how deep set Herculaneum is. This is less Brady-Sizism though, and more getting absolutely covered by volcanic debris, which we'll get into in a second. But this is like at street level, looking up one of the roads in Herculaneum. And it was incredible just getting to like walk on the streets that they walked on. And you can see a lot of these buildings have like multiple floors, which is really cool. And we'll get into why you see that here in Herculaneum and not so much in Pompeii. So the main thing that I talked about here when it came to geology was the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. So Mount Vesuvius was a stratovolcano. There's a lot of faulting in the Bay of Naples. And what we see there is like the European plate has the African plate underneath and it's just pushing straight up, and the European plate on top is cracking apart. And so we get a lot of volcanic activity here, including Mount Vesuvius. So on August 24th or October 24th in 79 AD, probably October 24th due to some archaeological evidence, but a lot of us still say August 24th. And I said that in my presentation and I was wrong on the site. So we started seeing on that day some tremors and then the first surges of pyroclastic flows and some ash and debris coming up. So this is a solidified pyroclastic flow. To scale, a person would probably be about like this big. So it's pretty tremendous. And then this is like microscopic volcanic ash. And this is just so cool getting to see. This is the Forum in Pompeii, and then back behind it, you can see Mount Vesuvius just looming, which is crazy. This is also an Andy Warhol painting of the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. I just want to get a print of that for my room. So the destruction itself, you can see in this map here, this gray is the ash and debris, and then the red is the pyroclastic flow. So we have Herculaneum here and Pompeii here. So Herculaneum is just in the direction of like the flows, versus Pompeii had the ash and debris coming and the flows. So you can see differences in the preservation of the sites based on its location and proximity to Vesuvius and like the wind pattern of the day. So the ash and debris reached Pompeii before the pyroclastic flows. And when we say like debris, it wasn't just like, I have some pumice, which I'll pass around from Mount Vesuvius, but we're talking like boulder size as well, just like raining down for hours and hours on Pompeii before it was covered in these surges. So in Pompeii, you don't see a lot of second and third floors of buildings preserved because it kind of got beat up before it was preserved. Versus Herculaneum, it was covered in a surge pretty quickly, and that was it. So in the end, Herculaneum was covered in about 25 meters of ash and debris, and Pompeii was covered in about 4 to 6 meters, just because it was a little further away from those pyroclastic surges. So that's why we see Herculaneum so deep set in the ground, because it was under 25 meters of ash that they had to excavate. So here, this is a little classic, so I'm going to throw it in for you. I hope you can tolerate it. This is a quote from Pliny the Younger's first letter to Tacitus. And this is like a firsthand account of this eruption. They weren't really familiar with volcanic eruptions at the time, so they kind of thought the world was ending. But what you can see in this one, his account, I mean, it's exactly what we picture in our head when we think of volcanic eruption. He mentions the ash coming into the sky like a pine tree, which isn't like our pine tree. They have an umbrella pine there, which goes up and then out, and umbrellas out like that. So it's exactly what you picture for a volcanic like mushroom cloud. And he understands, or at least tries to explain, why that cloud goes straight up and then billows out. He understands the cloud is like unsupported and spreads sideways. So he doesn't have like an understanding of what a volcano is, but he's still like making these conclusions as he's watching this happen and writing it down. And then this is just a tremendous quote. He said that he was only kept going by the consolation that the whole world was perishing with him. So they thought this was like the end of the world as we knew it. And the pictures that they have of like the recreations of the time, obviously they didn't like snap it on their phone at the time, but like they're dark. So this was like multiple hours and hours of just destruction. Getting to translate Pliny the Younger in one of my classes was probably the coolest thing I've gotten to do, just because it was like translating geology and Latin. Just, I don't know, kind of like the intersection between my interests perfectly. But the big thing we see now is the preservation. So again, Pompeii lacks a lot of the second floors, versus Herculaneum was just hit by like the incredibly hot pyroclastic flow so quickly that like everything was like carbonized. So we find like paper, like rolls of paper, like carbonized there that we can read. And we find in both sites where the debris kind of built up and trapped people, when their remains went away, we found little cavities when we were excavating, we being people long before and not the people on this trip. But they poured plaster into these cavities and were able to preserve these people in their last minutes. So you can see it was really jarring just seeing them in the street when you were walking around Pompeii. And then this one's inside of a museum. But that's one thing that we see preserved. We see a lot of graffiti. I mean, this was written on the walls of Pompeii by the people who lived there forever ago, and it's still there. This is an incredible fresco or like a wall painting from the Villa of Mysteries right outside of Pompeii. Nope. And I mean, look at this preservation. It's so beautiful. This is, we think, a depiction of the initiation into the cult of Bacchus, maybe, which is really cool. And then here we have a floor mosaic. So mosaic meaning it's made of like tiny little tesserae, like those little tiny stones. So you can see, imagine like how detailed and tiny those stones must have been. But this floor mosaic is like huge. And this is Alexander the Great right here. But it was preserved so beautifully. And that's in the House of the Faun in Pompeii. So that's a little sad. It was a tragic event. We had a day trip though, and we went to Capri. So there's some really cool pictures here. There's also some geology. It's not just like gorgeous pictures, but so this is the Blue Grotto at Capri, and the sides of the cave don't reach down into the water very far. So the sun lights the water and it comes up underneath to create this like blue glow that felt like we were mermaids. And when you like touch the water, it like lights up your hand. It was stunning. It's just a little aside. I'm going to throw in a few pictures and just hope you like them. So then we went to Rome for the next 2 weeks of the trip. So this is us at the Centro, which is like a little Italian university for classics inside Rome. You can see we had like a gorgeous outdoor study area. We were in like a dorm setting. This is all of us at the table taking our final exam. We had like a 2-hour, some people took longer, exam on the very last day after going nonstop for 3 weeks. So it was incredible, and the food was amazing. But I'm gonna talk about some of the different building materials that we saw in Rome. So like brace yourself, concrete is pretty exciting. So concrete itself is a mix of limestone, water, and volcanic ash made into a powder and then like ground into a paste. And then you throw in some rock chunks or aggregate. And it makes like the paste that we see like holding different bricks together and also like being like spread over surfaces and like carved into to make like a cool pattern on a wall. And it kind of like revolutionized a lot of architecture because it's such a light building material. And the volcanic ash that we get from Mount Vesuvius, it undergoes such a slow diagenesis underground from like the thermal springs and everything, and there's lucite in the water there too. And all of this comes together to make the ash have this property that when you put the water in, I used a chocolate chip cookie dough analogy on the trip to explain this better, but you know, when you're making like chocolate chip cookie dough and you're like stirring the chocolate chips in, which is the aggregate, and if your dough isn't sticky, the chips will kind of just fall out as you stir it. But if the dough is like stickier, it'll like keep the chips in. And so there's something that about the volcanic ash and the diagenesis process it gets in Rome that makes it stickier dough. Which means that even though it's not as strong as modern concrete, it's a lot weaker than modern concrete actually, but it has tremendous staying power and it's really waterproof also. So you can still see it here. This isn't just a cute picture. It's also, you can see the brick pattern behind it. It's called opus reticulatum, where you see the bricks in like that little diamond pattern and the concrete holding them together. I mean, it's pretty tremendous that that's still there. And then this is a quote from Vitruvius, who was an architect, and he wrote a bunch of like tediously detailed writings that we've gotten to translate over the years here. But this one, it shows his understanding that the hotness of the earth and the springs and everything and some intense fire, like the hydrothermal activity, has given the ash this quality. So even if he can't look at a microscopic level and see what's happening like this picture here, Vitruvius still understood that it coheres and hardens and it's waterproof because of this force under the ground, that's pretty impressive. Another thing we talked about a lot on the trip was how the different building materials you find in different places kind of shows how and where Rome was communicating with. So first we have marble, which sounds like a no-brainer, but there's a couple of different types. So this one is Luna marble. This is Trajan's column. And Luna marble is from the Carrara quarry in Tuscany. So that's actually like still within Italy. But then other marbles were from like the island of Chios in Greece. So there's some like communication there. And marble is used a lot because it's incredibly dense, but it has a hardness of 3, which we know isn't very hard. So it's really malleable and great for sculpting. Another thing we see is pink granite, which was really fun to talk about because like, why is granite pink?
And has potassium belt.
Thank you. Okay. So that it feels really nice not being the one who has to like hope I'm right when I say that on the trip. I was the only person that wasn't like classics focused on this trip. So I just like said a bunch of geology stuff and hoped I was right. So this pink granite you can see here in the Pantheon, it's beautiful, but it's also from Egypt. So it's like imported from there as well. And then we have imperial porphyry on the side, which was kind of this drove me crazy because we ran into like a porphyry column and they asked me, why is it purple? And I had no idea. And because like, why would it be purple? So I did a bunch of like research during the lunch break and I kept doing it while I was here because I still didn't fully understand why it was purple. So we know that a porphyritic rock is, it's like, it has like the finer matrix and then a few like larger porphyry, like they're called the crystals that are inside of it. I didn't write the word down. I went, oh, crystals. So it's like a hematite and piemontite matrix with large like white plagioclase crystals in it. So you can kind of see like the white crystals in it. So we think of porphyritic as like a category for igneous rocks, but they just called it porphyry as like the name of the rock. And this purple imperial porphyry, which gets its color again from like the hematite and piemontite, is from Egypt as well. So a couple other places we went. This is Hadrian's Villa in Tivoli, and you can see like these dome ceilings. They're able to do this because of like the brick and the concrete. Because when you do a dome ceiling, like the weight culminates at that point. And if you use a material like marble or granite or something, it'll just be so tremendously heavy that it's not going to be able to support the structure. So being able to use concrete and brick and stuff was like allowed the Romans to do these incredible building projects like Hadrian's Villa. Hadrian was an emperor and he just made this tremendous sprawling house because he could. He was the emperor. And then these are pictures at Villa d'Este, which was not Hadrian's Villa, but it was just another place we went to that day to talk about the theme of like water being an important part of Roman culture. And I mean, it's just stunning. This is like a multi-story fountain. The Coliseum, we did in fact go there. I feel like it would have been crazy if we didn't. So the Coliseum is made of travertine, which is a partially metamorphosed limestone. So it's about halfway between limestone and marble, and it's metamorphosed underground from those volcanic hot springs. So again, like a slow, gentle process. So it's like more structurally stable than limestone, but it's not like hardcore marble. And it has like this kind of weird gritty texture from, as it's like underground having this happen to them, colonial organisms are also living on it, like bacteria and like moss and stuff like that. So when you look at it, it looks like it's gonna kind of like crumble under your fingers because it's so like pitted. And then you also see like a bunch of brick here as well. So travertine was a big building material that we saw, and the Coliseum was crazy. It's like this underground structure here that they did everything into, and you can like stand here and look down and you just realize like the feat of putting this together must have been tremendous. The Roman Forum, we see a lot of marble here. This was kind of disillusioning for me. A lot of these columns, if you cut them in half, it's not marble all the way through. It's like some sort of cheap inside, like probably like a concrete or like a maybe like a travertine or limestone, and then it just has like a shell of marble around it, which is kind of a bummer if you think about it. I don't know. I thought it was kind of sad because I thought it was just like these like luscious like marble everywhere, and it's kind of like it looks like it, but it's on like a thin coating, which is a little bit of a bummer to me. But we have like the Temple of Faustina and Antoninus Pius here. We have the Arch of Septimius Severus. It was kind of a big thing that they would do. The emperors were, when they had some sort of victory, they wanted to commemorate it, they would give back to the population by building like a victory arch, and there'd be like this huge like celebration and everything, because building onto the Forum, you can see this is kind of like a mess, everything just building off of like where it started up top, because every single emperor just wanted to build something that gave them a legacy, and it was them giving back to the people with like these giant buildings. So we see a lot of the marble here, and it's just, I mean, look at these carvings. It's phenomenal. So then there's the Pantheon, which was, I mean, geology wise, every single geologist needs to go to the Pantheon, in my opinion, because the way they did these decorations inside, they made these incredible patterns by just using different rock types. So like these patterns you see here and all around here, these are just like, this is serpentine, this is that pink granite, this is a marble. You can see they just like made these intricate patterns by using different colored rocks. You can see the ceiling here. If you look past our faces, this is the like the classic dome for the Pantheon. And it's this concrete and that aggregate, those chocolate chips inside, the way that they chose this, they made, as you go up to the top, the aggregate they put in is lighter and like less dense. And so it's like you can see layers of just like different aggregates coming. It doesn't look like it, but just coming up to get that light top, I mean, the architecture is just phenomenal. We see that purple porphyry here. We see reds and yellows and greens and marbles. We see, they called it green porphyry. Again, we know it as serpentine. I just thought it was so cute. They just kept saying like, oh, it's porphyry. It's a color porphyry. Then there's something called brecciated marble, which I had never heard of. So like breccia, we know what that is, right?
Angular conglomerate.
I'm so proud of you guys. It's almost like I told you that answer beforehand. So when we see those like angular, those clasps inside breccia, that's what we think of, like the angular clasp. But then when we see that brecciated marble, it's a marble that kind of got like broken up and then underwent another round of metamorphosis. So those like angles, you can see them in there. It's all like, it looks cracked and broken, but it's smooth because it went through that second round of metamorphosis. I had never heard of the term brecciated marble before looking into the Pantheon. And then we see a bunch of granites as well. So I just wanted to give a big thank you to first Kelvin Ramsey is an alumni from the geology department that helped fund my being able to go on this trip. So I mean, just a massive, tremendous thank you to Kelvin for that. For Professor Pega for being so incredible and understanding and supportive and just a wealth of knowledge. These three people here who made sure that I survived the trip and had an amazing time. And then just everyone else too, who was on that trip. Thank you so much for making it so wonderful and tolerating me talking about ash and concrete like ad nauseum every single day. With that, any questions? Hi, Terry.
Hi, great presentation. You did a fantastic job.
Thank you, Terry.
So you were talking about how the marble columns were like involved out of that. How did they get the marble to shape the column?
You mean like how do they like get like an outer shell of it?
Yeah, how did they make that, you know, by chance?
Yeah, I mean, it was just like the same way that they'll sculpt like a marble like statue. I mean, because it has such a low hardness, it seems like it would be like a monumental task, but they were able to just like chisel it out, make sure there was an empty like circle inside, put the cheaper stuff in it. And then you do see with a lot of them, it wasn't just one, some of them are just one massive piece of rock, but a lot of them is also like a hole going through the column with like some sort of like support beam. And then it's just like cylinders stacked on top of each other to make one big column. So we're walking around these sites and there's just like shards of columns just like laying all over the place. And the first time we saw one, we were like, oh my God, it's a column. This is the coolest thing ever. And by the end, we had seen like hundreds of columns just laying on the ground next to us at these sites. And apparently they're not as big of a deal as we thought they were. So yeah, that's how they were able to get that marble shell around those columns. It seems like it would be just tremendously difficult, but
Yeah, that's why I was so curious, like, why would you do that much effort for a sheet of material?
yeah, I mean, that type of effort would be apparently a lot less than the type of thing they were able to put into the Pantheon. So I think they were just tremendously skilled when it came to like stonecraft, right?
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? I can't see if there's questions on Zoom. I don't know why. Hello? Oh, it's here. There's not. Any other questions? Jim?
Okay.
Thanks.
What kind of tool they use to like make things like baby? How do they do that?
So Jim was asking how they were able to shape the marble. I mean,
Really makes sense.
yeah, an extension of Terry's question. How were they able to do this? What tools did they use? I mean, that's a fantastic question. I'm positive it's that, but at the same time, I have an art major in the room who can probably help a little more. What would you use to sculpt marble? A chisel, probably. I imagine it wasn't like a power sander or something like that.
The power sander hadn't been invented yet.
You think aliens did it? Okay, thanks, Jim.
Only a couple more thousand.
They had, oh yeah, you would see this. Oh my goodness, this was so cool. You'd see it on so many of the different statues. And Gabby, again, like an art major and a classics major together, was like pointing this out at a bunch of places. You'll see in their hair, they learned this technique where in order to like make the hair look in like these little swirls, they had like a little like drill and they just drill in holes all over as well. So they had like rudimentary, like, I mean, it wasn't like a power tool, but it was still pretty impressive considering, but you'd just see like in all these different sculptures, just a bunch of holes drilled into them because they found this cool technique that they could do and it was everywhere. So that's another thing they did. Hi, Vera.
And essentially.
God. Yeah, I should have prepared more. Wow.
Do you know what the point would be to have that like column with concrete lever in? It seems like you have to keep the marble out.
Yeah, so the point I would say is one, cheaper, two, lighter. So those are my two thoughts for that. The question was, why would they put like a cheaper center into it when it would just be so much work and you'd just be taking marble out anyway? I'm imagining they had a really efficient way to do it, so it wasn't just like chipping a bunch of marble out. Otherwise, I don't think they would have just done that. But I mean, it's lighter. Because that concrete is like such a lighter building material, so you're putting less of like stress at the base of the column. But then also I'm imagining it was cheaper getting to use that marble elsewhere, assuming they were able to just take a little column of marble out from the inside, put it to the side and use it for something else.
Like
Russian nesting doll of columns. Yeah, exactly. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Volcanoes, perhaps? Anything else? Yeah, I don't know. Wait, let me show you guys the rock. That's the thread. I'll show this one on Zoom.
And you think you collected that one from Vesuvius?
I didn't collect
Oh,
it.
yeah.
This gentleman right there collected it from Vesuvius.
There you go.
So yeah, that's a question we're not going to ask on a recording. But yeah, so it's a red scoria. So again, like that pumice that has like that reddish like hematite coloring. I don't know if you can see it. I feel like a beauty YouTuber. So yeah, any last questions? Geology, classics, otherwise? Oh, Professor Pega, hi.
Hi, Heather.
Hi.
This was such a wonderful presentation on a day where it's so kind of like gloomy and gray outside. To revisit our hot Mediterranean summer is wonderful. Although I think we probably would have appreciated some of this weather when, you know, we were in the middle of the heat wave.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But so my question for you is, what is your favorite ancient building material?
I know I have a least favorite and it's tufa. Just because that drove me crazy reading about it. And that's why it's not in this presentation. Sorry guys. I think my favorite building material has to be, I mean, that imperial porphyry. It was just so stunning and it made no sense to me how they could have like a plum purple marble. Well, it's not marble, but like this plum purple rock being used. Like it was just so beautiful and I couldn't explain it based off of the stuff that I had seen in my classes. And so one, it's stunning, and two, it's confusing. And it's rich because it's purple. So thank you. Also, the room is packed. You wouldn't even believe it. It's crazy.
Turn around the camera. Can you turn around the camera? Oh.
No. Thank you for the question. Any last comments? I mean, thank you all so much for coming. I really bless you, Jim. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful day.